to another episode of Trips Explained. I'm Hero Pellegrino, and today I'll be talking about substituting paperback books into audiobooks. Thank you very much for watching today's video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. As always, we do have English, Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Ukrainian subtitles. We all know that eventually, if we do not take care of the forests around the globe, we are really screwed up. So what about stop using books and actually listen to them? An audiobook or a talking book is a recording of the book or other work being read out loud. A reading of the complete texts is described as an abridged, while readings of shorter versions are abridgments. Spoken audiobook has been available in schools and public libraries, and to a lesser extent in music shops since the 1930s. Many spoken word albums were made prior to the age of cassettes, compact discs, and downloadable audio, often of poetry and plays rather than books. It was not until the 1980s that the medium began to attract book retailers, and then book retailers started displaying audiobooks on bookshelves rather than in separate displays. With all that in mind, let's talk about how much we destroy the planet with paperback books. If you ever wondered how many trees are cut down every year, the shockingly short answer is more than 15 billion trees are lost annually to deforestation. While that number is staggering, it can be hard to visualize. For the 15 billion trees that are chopped down every year, every person on the planet could have 3,000 rolls of toilet paper. If you imagine 3,000 rolls of toilet paper sitting in your bathroom, they unlikely wouldn't fit. Now imagine how many trees just those 3,000 rolls equate to and the amount of deforestation it represents. Without those trees, many endangered animals become more vulnerable and others are forced to find new homes. Plus, the atmosphere is stuck with higher levels of greenhouse gases that would have otherwise been stored by those trees as a carbon sink. Sadly, many people are unaware of both the causes of deforestation and the impact it is having on the planet. And if people don't know about it, how can we stop it? Why do people cut down trees? Hint, it's not paper. There is a variety of reasons why people cut down so many trees, but here's a spoiler alert. Paper production is not one of the major causes. Sure, some things like toilet paper and paper goods such as plate, paper towels, and paper itself create a heavy toll in our world woodlands. But there are other far more damaging actions that are destroying the Earth's forests. How many acres of trees are cut down each year? As of the year 2020, the UN estimates the planet is losing over 7 million hectares per year to deforestation. Between 1990 and 2015, the world lost 129 million hectares of forests, an area about the size of South Africa. Natural forests lost by continent include Africa, 3.2 million hectares, Asia, 1.1 million hectares, Oceania, 200,000 hectares, Europe. Due to the excellent forest management, Europe did not net a loss of natural forest land on 2015. The 2020 report has not yet been released.
North America, 780,000 hectares, and in South America, 3.6 million hectares. In plain English, it's when people cut down or remove forest for whatever reasons. What are the 5 main causes of deforestation? There are specific causes that spur the destruction of forests, and when combined, the damage impact on the planet is multiplied. Making matters worse, deforestation destroys natural carbon sinks, which helps to fight against growing greenhouse gas emissions, and carbon footprint calculators, along with reports from official government bodies like the United Nations, show that emissions are on the rise. The following causes are the top 5 drivers of deforestation and account for the majority of forest cover loss. Deforestation. Cause 1. Farming. Food productions. Farming and grazing is the biggest cause of deforestation in tropical and subtropical countries, accounting for 80% of deforestation between the year 2000 and the year 2010. Of course, many people understand that food production is essential. They also argue that there must be ways of balancing the need for thriving forests along with meeting the nutritional needs of people around the world. And we agree. Deforestation cause number 2. Grazing and feeding livestock. A lot of deforestation is caused by the need for farmland, much of which is used to grow soy. Over 67% of soy is fed to animals, primarily poultry and pigs. Soy, palm oil, and cattle ranching are the most significant contributors to agriculture deforestation. Deforestation cause number 3. Drilling. Mining and drilling account for about 7% of all deforestation. Even when mining doesn't directly lead to deforestation, the process of extracting sources from the earth often leads to large amounts of pollution. Unfortunately, some studies have shown that over 25% of metal mines worldwide can be found within 10 kilometers of a protected area. For example, 15% of the Amazon is covered by active or plant oil concessions, and 80% is covered by mineral concessions. This is why 8 billion trees is working so hard to fight to rebuild those areas that have been cleared or are shadowed for cleaning. Deforestation cause number 4. Mining. Mining suffers from the same issues as drilling. It causes deforestation both through the direct clearing of forests and through pollution and industrial accidents. It can also be prone to ecological disasters, such as the famous 2019 iron mining disaster in Brumadinho, Brazil. There are about 400 iron mines in the same type in the Brazilian state of Minas Gerais, and the Brumadinho disaster occurred just 3 years after a similar disaster just 75 miles or 120 kilometers away. Some of these issues could be solved with improved safety and environmental measures, but establishing a unified set of goals and restrictions throughout the world is highly problematic, given that not all nations would follow them. Therefore, finding ways to work with individual governments is the key. By making an effort to stop ecological destruction in a region at a time, humans can actually do something about the problem instead of waiting around and just talking about potential solutions. Deforestation causes number 5. Wildfires. Wildfires are the cause of nearly 1 quarter of all deforestation, including about half in North America. According to the US government, 2.2 million hectares burned this year in California alone, with another 800,000 hectares destroyed in the northwestern United States, and many of those fires are still burning as of this publication. In fact, according to the United Nations, Arctic fires in June and July of 2019 released a total of 129 megatons of CO2, resulting in a cloud of soot larger than the European Union. Needless to say, these forms of deforestation has global warming implications. The fires that ravaged Australia over the past 2 years have led to serious and dangerous ecological threats. Other reasons for cutting trees down. In addition to the 5 main causes of deforestation, there are other lesser-known reasons that so many trees are cut down. Palm oil is the highest yielding, least expensive form of vegetable oil. Because its range is limited to the tropics, much of its market popularity has come at the expense of tropical rainforests. In fact, 90% of palm oil is produced in Malaysia and Indonesia. Yet these are the only ecosystems that support the orangutan. Only about 2% of global palm oil production is considered sustainable. Palm oil is also used to produce biodiesel. Urban sprawling. Urbanization, complete with sprawling and booming populations, is another indirect cause of deforestation. While not a major cause of deforestation, urbanization is noteworthy for several reasons. First, roads and urban development can fragment forests so that they are not longer continuous. While this may seem harmless at glance, fragmentation and edge effects can have a devastating impact on wildlife. With a growing population, cities must expand, so more land is being used for agriculture and livestock to feed these people, and trees are being cut down to make room for it all. Paper production is one of the more well-known reasons for deforestation. If you're wondering, a tree produces about 8,333 sheets of paper. A whopping 626,000 tons of paper are used to produce books each year in the United States alone. An average textbook contains about 700 pages, and about 30 billion trees are cut down to produce textbooks. Fortunately, there are a number of ways to reduce the number of textbooks needed, and many schools are embracing and opting for virtual books to counteract this amount. The link between deforestation and climate change. Many people wonder why deforestation is linked to climate change. The most obvious reason is that, according to the American government, deforestation directly contributes to about 12% of all greenhouse gases emissions. Mature trees store carbon in their branches, trunks, leaves, roots, etc. And the forests themselves store large amounts of carbon in their soil, which reduce and remove carbon emissions from the atmosphere. After deforestation, Much of the carbon is released in the form of CO2, a greenhouse gas. Slowing deforestation is viewed as a cost-efficient means of reducing overall greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, the United Nations Environmental, Developmental, and Agriculture Chiefs issued a joint statement saying that forests are a major requisite in front of acting in the global fight against catastrophic climate change. Thanks to their unparalleled capability to absorb and store carbon, forests capture carbon dioxide at a rate equivalent to about one-third the amount released annually by burning fossil fuel. Stopping deforestation and restoring damaged forests, therefore, could provide up to 30% of the climate situation. They further noted that, quote-unquote, 2020 will mark a pivotal moment in humanity's quest for a sustainable future, when greenhouse gas emissions need to start declining if we are to avoid the most severe impacts of climate change. The number of how many trees are cut down each year is so staggering that if they were stacked on top of each other and just 3 meters or 10 feet tall, they'd reach the moon and back almost 6 times. So, why don't more people know about this cause and effect? It's a bit complicated. There's really no one answer to this question. About a third of American people don't even believe that global warming is real. So it should come as no surprise that they aren't familiar with the details. People also tend to avoid conflict. Americans overestimate the percentage of their peers who don't believe in climate change. The result is that they avoid what they believe to be a controversial topic. In essence, this erroneous belief shuts down communications. Deforestation in the Amazon. When people think of deforestation, the first thing that often comes to mind is the Amazon forest. The Amazon rainforest has been called the lungs of the world, and we have a duty to take care of it. At least 390 billion trees are located in the Amazon. For perspective, that's a forest roughly the size of continental United States of America. There are about 2.7 trillion trees in the world, so the Amazon contains about 14% of the world's trees. Which trees sequester the most carbon? The Chihuahua tree sequesters the most carbon of any tree in the Amazon. It takes at least 1,000 years for a Chihuahua tree to grow to its maximum height of 40 meters or 130 feet, but a mature Chihuahua can sequester 40 tons of carbon. In fact, each Chihuahua sequesters about as much carbon as 1/3 of a hectare in the Amazon. Likewise, mangroves are particularly good at sequestering carbon because their root system is particularly designed to store CO2. Why biodiversity is crucial to survival. The World Health Organization has concluded that biodiversity is critical for sustaining the ecosystem that we rely on for nutritional needs. It has also noted that along the loss of biodiversity, we're losing many critical genes and chemicals before scientists can get a chance to study them. Understanding rainforest deforestation and its current impact, keeping the planet's trees healthy and populous is not only good for the climate, it's good for all of our existence. Trees are one of the nature's powerful quote-unquote carbon sinks, areas to sequester and remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Since we're making more and more CO2 every single day and simultaneously removing the planet's method to deal with it, the equation is highly unbalanced. Rainforests and jungles. The Philippines rainforests and more. Although only 7% of the world is covered with tropical rainforest, their ecosystems contain about half of the world's species. Further, tropical rainforests store more carbon than other types of forests. It's pretty difficult to find out up-to-date statistics for the Philippines deforestation due to funding issues, but from the years 2003 to 2010, the Philippines lost nearly 1% or 50,000 hectares of its forests per year. This is particularly distressing as the Philippines is considered to be a biodiversity hotspot. Deforestation in America and deforestation rates. From the moment the first colonists set foot in America, deforestation began. It hasn't stopped. The United States deforestation rates are at about 385,000 hectares per year. But that's not the entire story. The United States contains about 8% of the world's forests. Nearly one-third of the country is forest land, or about 304 million hectares. Just over half belongs to the government. The rest belongs to private entities. Despite losing 385,000 hectares per year, harvesting nearly 4 million hectares of timber each year between the years 1990 and 2010, reforestation efforts led to a net gain of over 7,500,000 over that period, or about 375,000 hectares per year. But, as mentioned previously, 2020 was a record-breaking year for wildfires, and not in a good way. Climate change is forcing the United States to reevaluate forest management, and unless action is taken soon, years like 2020 could one day become the norm. Effects of deforestation and the dangerous impact of deforestation. We've already mentioned the fact that deforestation is actually making pandemics happen, but the additional loss of biodiversity and associated consequences aren't actually the scariest thing about deforestation. Forests can actually have profound impacts on the weather. The rainforests of South America, for example, don't just impact weather in South America. There's evidence to suggest that they actually impact the global water cycle. Thirdly, deforestation affects ecosystems, nutrition, weather patterns, and even the climate, but it also impacts wildlife by destroying habitats and ecosystems, and there are other problems. Ecosystems. About 80% of Earth's terrestrial animals live in forests. Deforestation is an essential threat to many of them. Human welfare. About 250 million people live in forests or savannas and depend on them for their well-being. Air quality. Forests have an enormous effect on the quality of the air we breathe. They act like a filter that strips too much of the pollution and carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Global warming. Forests act as carbon sinks, absorbing large amounts of CO2, that is a greenhouse gas, from the atmosphere and storing it in forms of trunks, branches, leaves, etc. Deforestation destroys the trees. This both releases the carbon they've stored and prevents them from storing more. Carbon, a double whammy. According to the World Resource Institute, if tropical deforestation, tropical alone, were a country, it would rate third in CO2 equivalent emissions behind the United States and China. Water. Forests have a large impact on the water cycle and are critical for understanding the water supplies of many nations, such as Brazil's, due to their impact on the weather. Finding solutions to deforestation. This problem is absolutely huge, but there are many ways to combat it. First, management. Imagine what could happen if a farmer harvests his crops but never planted new ones. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that things won't end well, but that's exactly what's happening with our forests in much of the world. In fact, we've lost 46% of the forests that existed at the dawn of human civilization. Forest management isn't just a moral obligation to the planet, it's actually common sense. Speak out. Make a difference. Make your voice heard. The United States and Europe have stabilized their net rates of deforestation and have actually begun gaining trees in recent years. These sustainable models could work elsewhere, but only if we all work together. Support tree planting groups. You have the power to make a big difference in controlling and eliminating the impacts of deforestation. Many groups around the world are working to plant trees every single day, and the small effort on the part of everyone could turn the tide and reduce the number of trees cut down every minute, every day, and every year. With only that in mind, how about stop buying new books? And if you really need a new book, how about trying to find a used copy of the book, or even downloading the audiobook version instead?
With all of that being said, that's where I'm going to end today's episode. As always, thank you very much for watching today's video. If you have any doubts at all, you can send me an email to hugo.loh@gmail.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And as always, have a very good one.